Hey Emma,
Yes, Balin.
what do you call it when you're the only person in your class to receive an average grade?
I don't know. What do you call it, Balin?
Sea of Solitude. Hello and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your achy, I just ran 13 and change miles today host Madeline.
I'm your parched, not sure if it's allergies or cold host Emma.
And this is Talk Health. We talk about our aches and pains for an hour in your ears.
It's just that the weather here has been going back and forth and raining and not raining and windy and not windy. It really cannot make its mind up about what season it is here. And it's kicking my butt.
That's true here too, but that's not why, I don't have an excuse. I voluntarily put myself through this.
Yeah, you've no one to blame but yourself in this case, Mom.
Look like boyfriend, a little.
No one to blame but yourself and your other half.
Yes, what is it called when the two things are relying on each other? Not codependent, not in a bad way. In nature. The little thing that eats the bugs.
Symbiotic?
Thank you. My symbiotic.
That's the good one, right?
Yes, I
or
hope so.
Is that like the overarching term?
That's great. Let's just analyze my relationship for an hour. That seems good.
I just mean there's the three different kinds and then there's the overarching term for all of them, right?
That's more biology than I remember.
Well, because I know parasitism is a type of relationship in which there's two parties involved, right?
But only one gets parasitic is not symbiotic. I would not describe Clickbait Boyfriend as a parasite.
I know. Fine. This is now we talk biology. I'm just trying to remember the terms because there's when it's totally balanced. Then there's one that gets benefit and one that's unaffected, and when there's one that gets benefit and one that's hurt, right?
I'm pretty sure symbiotic is fully balanced.
Okay.
Look, I said not. Not a parasite.
It's okay. Well, we know.
So much for that. So anyway, now that we've fully gone completely away from video games and had a nice little biology lecture, this week we're going to be talking about Blade Runner, the video game, not the film, and Sea of Solitude, which is about a metaphorical ocean, not about a grade between a B and a D in high school.
Although a lot of reviewers rated it about a grade between a D and a B.
I don't know how anybody didn't make that the title of their review. Sea of Solitude. It's fine.
You should really be a games reviewer, but only write the headlines.
I really think that I should be the person that writes headlines and taglines for things.
Just add a sixth job, It's fine.
Great. Yeah. It's all good. I haven't updated the Talk This blog in a year. But yeah. I have time for another job, absolutely.
Every day I get home, I'm I'm going to do split screen tonight. And then I don't do it.
I know. Clickbait Boyfriend is always sixth on the list, the blog series, and it's just, I get to 4,
Uh-huh.
So, when I texted you this week, asking for my usual update on what the games that we are talking about is, because I can't remember it to save my life, you sent it to me in the order Sea of Solitude and Blade Runner, which made me think that Blade Runner was the new game. Which I think was partial. It was a combination of you sent me in that order, which could only be old game, new game. That's how it must be.
You're true. That's the order.
But also because there was a new Blade Runner movie that came out just 2 years ago, and also there's a Cyberpunk game coming out, and it just sort of blended together in my brain.
Right. No, there aren't very many there are, but they're less prevalent movie tie-in games these days, right? There's stuff where there are characters from movies, right? There's the Spider-Man game and the Avengers game coming out, but I feel like that's less of a prevalent thing where like a game comes out with the movie to sort of promote it.
Well, Blade Runner is not that either, to be fair.
I know that, but like just generally it feels like there's less of stuff like that.
I don't think it's even really fair to call the superhero games that get released, movie tie-ins. Of course, these characters are much more popular because of the success of the movies. But the stories that are being told in those games very rarely are the exact same stories as in the movie. And, those are existing characters anyway.
Right. Right.
Nothing along the lines of actual movie versions or video game versions of movies that I feel like was more of a thing in the 90s and early aughts.
The B-movie, the video game.
Is there really B-movie, the video game?
Yeah, there is.
No, there's not.
Yes, there is.
That's not.
I wouldn't lie to you about something so significant.
That's not allowed. So is that the...
Clearly somebody allowed it.
Is that the prequel to Sea of Solitude? B-movie, the game?
Would it be the... It depends on if it's a inspirational type narrative or like a sad narrative, right? Like, are you going from the grade B to the grade C, or are you going from the grade C to the grade B?
I don't know. All I can think of is I'd be pretty depressed too if my parents were a woman and a bee.
Yeah. I don't know if I would be depressed, but I would certainly be something.
I would be something. You're absolutely right.
Something which you need a therapist of some sort.
So, I'm getting ahead of myself because Sea of Solitude is the new game. So let's go rewind back in time a little bit and talk about Blade Runner.
Tell us a little bit about Blade Runner, Mel.
You betcha. Blade Runner is a 1997 third-person point-and-click adventure game from Westwood Studios, which I couldn't really tell if they were like a subsidiary of Vista Interactive or if they were just like a company they hired or something. But anyway, Vista Entertainment? Vista Interactive? Something like that.
Either way.
But it's for Windows. It's based around, but not strictly based on, the 1982 film from Ridley Scott starring Harrison Ford, which famously was not super well received when it came out, I think, right? And has really... We talked about this on the show, relating to greatest games of all time a little bit, I think. The Blade Runner has definitely grown in esteem.
The movie or the game?
The movie.
Or
I think both, but the movie even more so, because it was a bit of a flop, and it wasn't a great experience for anyone involved in it, apparently. And, Harrison Ford, for years refused to talty about it in any way.
That's so funny to think about now, though, with, how, revered that movie seems to be.
Yeah. And the game, too, I think has grown in esteem. And necessarily, right, the movie kind of had to become better received than it was, because Blade Runner, the video game, as you may have noticed if you were listening carefully to the years and doing some math, came out 15 years after the movie.
Yeah.
Which makes it's weird. It's a little weird.
When was the book published?
Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Yes, that one.
I actually don't know. I didn't go that deep into my
I didn't
research.
think about it either until now, but that got me curious of, probably late 70s. I can't imagine it would have been much before that, unless it's a really old book and I just don't know.
Well, I'm sure a quick Google will solve this question for any of our listeners. Anyway, Blade Runner the game takes place... Wikipedia described, I think in quotes, as it's a sidequel to the film.
Yeah.
So basically it's running parallel to the film and occasionally intersecting with the film, but it's a completely original story. And there seem to have been a number of reasons behind this. It did seem to me in reading about it that it was the designer's original intention to create something in this way, to not just do a one-to-one retelling, so people wouldn't know what was going to happen, and to have the opportunity to tell an original story. But also, the rights to Blade Runner are evidently split in a somewhat complicated way. There are 3 or 4 different companies.
in terms of original intention, I'm sure they got together and like, let's do something with Blade Runner. And then it's sort of built from there, right? Based on what was actually viable.
Yes. One of the tricky parts of the development of this game is that they weren't allowed to use any footage from the film, any music from the film, any of that stuff, because apparently there were so many companies that were involved in the rights. Like, the original movie went way over budget and somebody else stepped in, and like there's just all these people and it was unclear who owned what, that they didn't want to get hit with any kind of copyright stuff. So the only thing that they could really use is likenesses of the actors. And they did get some of the actors to come back and cameo, not Harrison Ford, because, as I said, he did not want anything to do with Blade Runner for a long time. And also, because apparently, and again, this is according to Wikipedia, it's like third-hand thing, but apparently Harrison Ford doesn't believe that movies should be adapted into video games. Which, like...
How very specific of him.
Fair, you know? Like, not the wrong take.
Someone must have, like, asked him that question, though.
Right?
I wonder what... Like, maybe in reference to, like, Star Wars or Indiana Jones or something?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know either. But, like, it would be weirder if he just, like, suddenly came up with that out of nowhere, right? But it's still a little weird that someone was like, you know, it would be a good question to ask Harrison Ford his opinion on whether movies should be adapted into video games.
Well, it might have been, I don't remember the exact context of this. I thought it was a quote from one of the developers who was saying that they had heard this about him. So I guess maybe it was they offered him to come in. So they offered all the actors to come in and do cameos. And his character does appear, just again, in kind of cameo appearances in the game. And so maybe it was...
He's, like, mentioned a lot, and I think he turns up, like, once.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So maybe it was his agent doesn't believe that movies should be turned into games.
His agent missed the chance to get ahead of the times, you know?
Man, whatever happened to Harrison Ford, you know? If only he'd done this game, he might be big.
I think he got, like, pushed off a bridge or something.
He's a janitor, right? Isn't that what he does now?
Yes, I'm sure that's what he does.
Going back to his roots?
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so in Blade Runner, you do not play as Harrison Ford's character, Rick Deckard. Instead, you play as Ray McCoy, and you're a Blade Runner. I haven't seen the film, so bear with me, people. It does not feel like you would need to have seen the film to understand this game, but...
You haven't seen it?
I don't think so.
I remember watching it at Grandma's house with Hollis and Jackson when we were, like, 10.
Oh, you know, now that you say that, that rings a little bit of a bell, but not enough that I remember anything about it.
Every time I think of, like, a weird movie that I shouldn't have been watching at the age that I feel like I watched it at, it's always, like, at Grandma's house with the cousins. Like, it's Spirited Away, too. Like, I really distinctly remember watching Spirited Away at, like, 6 at Grandma's and really being scared of it. And I have the same sort of feelings towards Blade Runner.
Did you read the back-to-back articles this week about how Spirited Away will never be on streaming, and then Spirited Away is going to be on streaming?
Yeah, that was so weird.
That incredible?
Yeah. Anyway, it's not on streaming I can get, so is it really on streaming at all?
I mean, fair, but still, I thought it was really funny. Anyway, you play as Ray McCoy. You're a detective in 2019 LA. So, today.
Yeah. Listeners in LA, you are Roy McCoy.
Ray McCoy, not Roy McCoy.
Ray McCoy.
Roy McCoy is a
dumb
dumb
that.
name.
I like that it's like similar to Rick Deckard in that it sounds like it should rhyme but doesn't quite.
Yeah.
Right?
That's just how people are named in 2019 LA.
Yeah. Please confirm, listeners.
Do you have an almost rhyming name? And so you're a detective and you're hunting down replicants, right? Which are basically secret robot humans.
Yes.
Which I imagine is what Harrison Ford does in Blade Runner, too.
Yes. The very unfamiliar sci-fi concept of machines blending in as humans.
Yes, never heard of that before.
Uh-huh.
So in this game, it's a point-and-click adventure, which normally, listeners, you might remember that this is not my genre. I don't tend to care for point-and-click adventures. They're not my thing. But this one sounds kind of interesting. I was reading about this, and I have a deep feeling that were I to play it, I would still find it very boring. But it seems a little bit more interesting than most of the kind of Monkey Island style games that were very big during this couple of years. Because instead of, you're doing a lot of detective work, not surprisingly, because you are a detective, searching for clues and doing questioning and analyzing stuff at crime scenes. And I was impressed by how sophisticated this game seems to be.
Yeah. My research was pretty heavily focused on Sea of Solitude this week, but I did watch, like, the first 20 minutes of Blade Runner. And even more than just the gameplay, I was really struck by, like, how kind of good the cutscenes look. Like, don't get me wrong, they're kind of blurry and, like, low quality in that way, but, like, maybe it's the low lighting, but something the way the models are, they're like 3D models with voice acting. No choppy little Final Fantasy VII characters. It's all, 3D cutscene with normal looking people. And, like, they, like, move very well and are expressive, and I didn't get very much, like, uncanny valley from them.
So, I won't pretend to understand the specifics of this, but apparently the company designed their own engine that was quite different from how 3D modeling was generally done at that time. Like, it uses voxels.
Voxels.
Don't know what that is. But it's relevant, and it's come up in the news a little bit this week because it made Blade Runner very difficult to emulate. Because not only are they using this bizarro engine, but also, and this ties in with last week's discussion about game in general, archival. The company lost the source code to Blade Runner while switching offices. And is also now, 15 or 16 years defunct.
Right.
So basically, these folks on the emulator Scum VM, which I had heard of before, it's an emulator for adventure games like Monkey Island, which were built in the Scum engine, but has apparently since expanded to other games in that genre, had worked for 8 years to reverse engineer the engine.
Wow.
And only just in June released it for, like, bug testing to the public, but there were a couple stories from just a couple days ago about how it's now easier to play. So they must have hit some kind of milestone with that.
Yeah. I mean, that's really cool, right?
I mean, it's used, obviously, talking about emulators and ROMs, you still need access to a ROM of it. So I have no idea how available those are online. The Scum people are not providing ROMs, they're just providing emulation. But yeah, they were talking about how incredibly hard it was because not only is it this, like, bizarro engine and they don't have anything to work from, they were also saying until you get the engine working pretty well, it's more or less impossible to get past the first scene. Because there's, like, a hover car, there's, like, so much going on. So yeah, I just can't imagine working on something like that for 8 years. That's wild.
Well, if you're dedicated, I guess.
So now everyone is calling for it to get put up on, do we refer to it as GOG, or is it GOG?
I don't know.
GOG.
I don't want to call it GOG. Please don't.
People are, like, calling for it to get put up on there for sale, which I can't imagine will ever happen because the rights must be very complicated.
Yeah. Another one of those games that needs to be preserved.
Yep.
Or ported to the Switch.
Oh, man.
But I think this is a really interesting way to do, like, a movie game. And not just because it's, like, clearly not for promotion, right?
Yeah.
Because unless it, maybe, like, 15-year anniversary promotion, you could, opportunist on that. But it doesn't feel like it was originally intended for promotion.
Well, it couldn't have been. The game was really expensive. Even though it sold really well, it didn't make that much money. It's like they wanted to
Right.
make a sequel and they were like, this is gonna be too expensive. Never mind.
Yeah. Um, but I think it's like a really interesting way to approach adapting something. Um, and you know, in terms of like we've talked a little bit about the other way around, right? Like going from movies to video games. And it feels like something that in both cases is a good idea is like taking the world and then telling a different story in it, as opposed to like taking wholesale the story from a video game and putting it into a movie, right? And it seems to have worked in the opposite case with this one, in terms of like they took the world and some of the characters and concepts, but they just made a story that more fit the medium that they were working with.
Definitely. I mean, in all the retrospective pieces, especially these ones talking about the emulator from this past few months, everyone is calling it out as one of the best, if not the best, movie-based games of all time. Which is not surprising, because Blade Runner is an interesting, if not these days, right? I'm willing to maybe give it credit that this was more of a new thing, at least on film, in the 80s. Although even that might not be true. But even though the world of Blade Runner, right, like now we're like, oh yeah, whatever, like robots masquerading as people, like that's new.
It's just because at home they've been watching
Battlestar Galactica. Yeah, I know.
So,
but it's a vivid world, and there's a lot of like fun stuff to do with it. And even if Harrison Ford won't be in your game, there's a lot to play with. And at that time anyway, not like crazy expectations around it being like awesome, because the movie wasn't at that point yet.
Yeah.
This game is ridiculous.
I feel like Harrison
though.
Ford would be a bad video game actor anyway.
Why? Because he doesn't emote?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure why. I just feel like he wouldn't be a very good voice actor.
I wonder if he does any voice acting.
Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, if I had just Luke as my sample base for Mark Hamill, I wouldn't say he would be a great voice actor either, but he is. So.
Well, he hasn't done that much voice acting, but maybe that's about to change, because he was in The Secret Life of Pets 2.
Oh, wow. If he was in The Secret Life of Pets 2, then that's entirely different.
I also want to note, maybe he's changed his mind about video game adaptations, because he voiced Han Solo in LEGO Star Wars The Force Awakens.
Where they just shoved a huge paycheck down his, shirt.
His only other credited thing is the Star Wars Holiday Special, which is notoriously terrible, so.
Well, good for you, Harrison Ford. You're a Lego man now.
I feel like the Lego video games are some of the only really high-profile movie adaptations that get released anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't really think of any others. I mean, I'm sure that there are still movie tie-ins that are released, especially, I assume, for kids' movies.
Sure.
Especially with mobile gaming. You know, I bet that's where all of them have gone.
That would make sense.
They do, like, little match 3s for the movies. I did have, like, a Frozen match 3 game on my phone for a while, so those do exist.
You've admitted it to everyone.
Oops. I was in ninth grade. I was foolish. I don't know if I was in ninth grade. When did Frozen come out?
Frozen came out my freshman year of college.
I was in junior year of high school. I was foolish then.
Did you read all about all the branching narrative and how this game works and everything?
Yeah, there's 13 different endings, right? And I also read something about, like other characters, other Blade Runners are also looking for clues while you're looking for clues.
Yeah. So
they'll, like, drop them off with you when you check in.
Yeah, so it's I was reading that it was kind of rare, because not only was it 3D, but it was also real time. So they had, like, a SimCity thing happening, basically, where the other Blade Runners are out there doing things and accomplishing tasks based on whether they are a human or a replicant. Because so there are, like, 15 suspects, so 2 of them are always replicants, I guess, for story reasons. But the other 13, randomly, are human or replicant each game.
That's pretty
Isn't
cool.
that nutty?
Yeah. I mean, it makes it so you can't, like, totally cheat, right? You can't just, like, find a... I mean, I guess it wasn't really a thing back in 1997, but you can't pull up, like, a walkthrough and be like, okay, who do I trust? What do I do? It actually requires you to do some thinking for yourself.
Yeah. And you also get to choose how you interact with NPCs. So there's different... you can choose your own questions, of course, but you can also choose, like, automatically, you know, are you polite, normal, surly, or erratic for your demeanor?
Polite, normal, surly, or erratic?
Yeah.
What if surly is my normal, though?
Too bad. It's not McCoy's normal.
Even surlier.
Yeah. And even McCoy is not canonically, well, I don't know, but is not consistently a human or a replicant. Depending on your choices, it decides what he is.
Well, that plays into endings, right?
Yeah. Freaking nuts.
That's pretty cool.
I mean, no surprise it was on 4 CDs.
Wow.
So.
That's a lot of CDs.
Yeah, I know.
But I can see how it would be. The walkthrough I was watching was like part 1 of 9 and it was only like an hour long, so I don't think it seemed like it was a particularly extensive game. But I guess even for like then, if it was like 10 hours long and had that level of graphics and that many things going on in the background, that would be pretty pushing the limits.
Yeah, and theoretically quite replayable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they said the script ended up being 500 pages.
Yeah.
And I thought you would appreciate this. QA had to play through it 2,500 times.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
To catch every possible.
That sounds like too few, to be honest.
It's like, how many people do you think were doing that? How many people was that spread over?
I don't know. You'd hope a lot. You'd hope it wasn't just one person.
It can't just be one person.
Locked away in a dungeon. They drop off their food with them like 4 times in 24 hours.
I hope they were a replicant, not a human.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, there's some elements of QA you can automate these days, but I don't think it was happening back in 1997.
Yikes.
Anyway.
I think it's probably about time to switch games.
Yep. So let's dive right in.
This is going to be an interesting mashup this week. I already have some ideas about terrible games that I can create.
So Sea of Solitude is a 2019 German game. Is it from a studio?
Yes.
It's like
they don't have a Wikipedia page. That's how small they are, but it's called Joe May Games.
Joe May Games. So it's really like the brainchild of like one person.
Cornelia Geppert.
Yeah. It's not made by one person. It's not a whole like utter effort.
No,
like
it's made
Jonathan
by
Blow
12 people, which I still thought was quite small.
I mean, for indie studios, that's not ridiculously small.
I just appreciated she was talking about it. She's like, oh, our lead animator is also the voice of Kay, and like they really do wear the multi hats in the way you think of in an indie studio. Anyway, continue.
Right. But it's the story and experience of this one woman, Cornelia. What was her last name?
Geppert.
And it's like 6 hours long. You play as Kay, who is this little, well, not so little, but little monster kind of girl. She has like claws and hair and red eyes and everything. And when you wake up, you're in a boat in the middle of a storm. And you have to sort of discover what you're doing there, and how to get out of there and how to become a human again, while avoiding or following other monsters in the area. And that's sort of the basic thing. But like it opens at the beginning with like this is a story based on a personal experience with I think loneliness was what it was. and like it's not representational of any particular any particular condition or a universal experience or anything like that. It's very much like somebody's personal essay on parts of their life.
Except I don't think it's just based on her life. The way they talked about it, it seemed like she presented the idea as a based on like a bad breakup, and the other members of the team talked about other times they felt lonely.
Sure. I'm just saying what it says in this.
Oh, sorry. Never mind.
Yeah. Like, I'm sure in developing it, everybody put their own ideas in, especially on a team that small. But the disclaimer at the beginning is very much like, this isn't like an individual story. It's not supposed to be representative of anything in particular or a universal experience. Which feels like a little bit of a silly disclaimer.
Well,
I don't need that disclaimer.
I guess they're just trying to shirk anyone saying it's about depression, right?
Right. It was more like the fact that it was kind of laid out for me at the beginning, I went and played about 3 hours of this, so about half of it. I think maybe a little less than halfway through it. But I wish that they hadn't laid out the disclaimer for me at the beginning, because then I'm already looking at it with particular set of eyes, I felt like, as opposed to just experiencing it.
Well, from what I read in the reviews, that kind of on-the-nose style seems to permeate the entire game.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, that's what it's true to, right? Like, it's very much like an individual experience. It's like this one girl in her life, basically. And not that Kay is necessarily based on one person in particular, but it's about Kay and her life. But I feel like if that would have been less obvious if it wasn't like at the beginning. Like, this is one story. It's not necessarily going to connect with you.
I know, it does feel a little bit like they're bracing themselves for bad reviews. Yeah.
At the same time, and I saw this in with the Wikipedia article too, of like one of the reviews wrote like it felt weird to give it a review score. And I kind of feel the same way about it, in that like, one, review scores are kind of dumb to begin with, but two, like, it's such like a personal essay, and I guess you get your personal essays graded in school, but like, it feels weird to be like 7 out of 10 on this very personal story of family and loneliness, you know?
Yeah, but at the same time, no one would ever say that about a movie.
I guess so.
Or a memoir.
But it feels a little bit like a creative documentary. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like with movies, I'd never go to a movie and I'm like, oh, well, that person's life story is stupid. I'm more like, oh, the acting was bad. Or stuff like that, right?
I guess so. I think it's interesting because, yeah, I don't know if I read the review you're talking about, but I read a column on Kotaku about someone saying essentially that it felt weird, or that they didn't like the game, but they felt bad about not liking it because it was so personal.
Yeah, I played a lot of these games. I took Games for Change class in college, and we had to play a lot of games. And like there were a couple we played. Like this reminded me of Papa and Yo a lot, which is like one about a boy and his abusive father, but the abusive father is like a monster that he has to cooperate with to solve puzzles. And also like there was the game like That Dragon Cancer that like a married couple put out about like their baby dying of cancer. And like all those kinds of games, it feels weird to be like this is a boring game. You know?
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with that second one, that feels too close.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. This game, I mean, she's talking about it as being inspired by a breakup, which, like, breakups can be real bad, but I feel like that's not on the level of...
I didn't read it as inspired by breakup, I just read it as she came up with the idea after a breakup.
Fair enough. I guess I'm just saying I wouldn't put the critique ability, the critique level of this game on the same level as a game about a couple whose child died of cancer. I guess.
Right. I just mean, like, I don't know. I always felt weird, right, reading people's, like, personal essays in school, too. Right?
It's fair.
Like, it was... I did some, like, college essay tutoring, and always in that, I was very much, like, I wasn't talking about what they were writing about. I was just talking about, like, you know, like, oh, this paragraph's a little long, or something like that.
Well, that was a thing that we would get when I was interning at the Moth, too, is a lot of people, so they have, like, an open story pitch line. Basically, anyone can call in and pitch a story, and if people like it, they'll, you know, continue to work with them and call and learn more and that kind of thing. But a lot of people will call in or will email the info account, which was more my job, you know, to tell a story, and their most interesting story is about, you know, the worst day of their life, more or less. And there's a lot of those, and the producers sort of had to you know, they have to say, you know, it's really sad. I mean, not that they talk to most of these people, but, you know, in their review, it's like, it's really sad, but, you know, what about this story is really special, right? I feel like it comes from that same kind of place of course, this is intensely meaningful to you, but it's not different from any other number of people's stories, really. And it's, you know, it's hard to, like, they're having to focus on the kind of the craft of the storytelling, right? And that's, I feel like, kind of analogous to focusing on the gameplay here.
Right.
Which seems, you know, pretty more or less like it's a pretty indie game kind of gameplay, right? It's like platform puzzle thing.
Yeah. I mean, the gameplay is mostly like you have a boat, you can steer your boat around. The boat is kind of hard to control, which, you know, is, you know, representative of an actual boat, I feel like. You can also, like, jump places, climb ladders, and then there's different kinds of monsters that you have to avoid in different ways. So, like, sometimes you do have to, like, jump into the water, so you have to make sure that the big monster that's in the water is not nearby before that you get back on land, basically. Or there was one with, like, some creepy shadow children that you'd have to, like, lure into the light, and then sort of fry so that they wouldn't punch you to death. Stuff like that. So, like, little logic-based sort of puzzles, or timing-based kind of puzzles, I guess I would call them. There's also, like, little collectibles, which I feel like are very unnecessary for this kind of game. Like, I don't think it was, but it kind of makes me feel like if a game was, like, did a Kickstarter and then got too much money, they're like, well, that's some collectibles with the extra money, yeah. But there's, like, seagulls you can shoot to fly into the air, and, like, bottles you can find that seem to be written from Kay to herself. Or not, like, intentionally to herself, but she's just, like, finding bottles that she left out there before. The bottles at least thing sort of works in that if you're looking for it, like, metaphorically, if it's like a cycle thing, like you leave notes for yourself when you're in a dark place, so that when you come back to the dark place you find them again. Like, that sort of works thematically. I don't know what the seagulls are there for.
Why not?
They're just there to sort of distract me whenever the button prompt to tell them to shoe comes up on the screen. But yeah, I do kind of feel in a similar way, and I don't, like, we've talked before, you don't like games that are not, like, sort of artsy-fartsy, abstract in their storytelling. But in a lot of ways, I'd kind of prefer this one if it was that way.
Oh, I don't have a problem with games that are artsy-fartsy abstract. I just think that they have to... I think that sometimes it's a lazy choice. But I was reading a lot of reviews on this one that the narration doesn't give you any room to breathe and it holds your hand too much.
Yeah. Anyway, I played 4 chapters in the prologue of it. So I just got through the storyline with her brother, who, when he turned human again, I was really not expecting him to look the way he looked. And it kind of distracted me a little bit. He's like little Ron Weasley.
Oh no. So I did find a particularly interesting, and I'm not sure what this was attributed to. It wasn't in quotes, but I thought it was a weird way to describe a game on a Wikipedia page. So to quote Wikipedia, and this is in like just the overview section, basically, Sea of Solitude is not meant to be fun. Its focus is on letting players experience what it feels like to be affected by depression and its troubling past.
See, I saw that, but it doesn't have a citation.
I know, right? Who wrote that?
So somebody just went on Wikipedia and wrote that.
What an idiotic take.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call my experience with Sea of Solitude, like, fun.
Sure.
It's not unengaging. Like, we've sort of brushed around this subject before. Maybe this would be a good one for a side quest. But I feel like fun is the wrong measure sometimes for a game.
Sure.
Should be how much you're invested and engaged in it. And that's not necessarily the same thing as fun.
No, but I just think, like, what idiot was like, this game is not meant to be fun. Like,
somebody who felt very strongly about it.
No doubt.
Somebody who went around and read the bad reviews and it's like, people don't get it. I'm going to edit the Wikipedia page to show them.
I did think it was interesting that even, so, you know, I read a lot of mediocre reviews of this game, but it struck me that each reviewer had a very different part of the game that they were like, this is the good part.
Mm-hmm.
Which I feel like is not usually what I see in reviews. Usually,
Right.
if they're mediocre, there's pretty much consensus over what's good and what's not. And there was definitely consensus here about, for the most part, the narration was too much, and the metaphors didn't always land. But then each reviewer had, like, one metaphor that was like, this hit me. And then there was that Kotaku navel-gazing one, where he was like, is the fact that I'm not connecting with this part of the point? Is the fact that the metaphors are too on the nose, like, part of this?
I mean, it does say it's, like, very individualistic. It's not meant to resonate with everyone. So that kind of does make sense to the thesis,
Sure.
I guess, that, like, people are picking up on different things. Like, it's written so specifically that it's sort of random what you end up connecting with, I guess. The thing I really like, it has really good use of the vibration function. Like, every time you hit the water, especially when it's stormy, the controller vibrates, and during some of the scary parts, there's, like, just intermittent vibrations that don't really correlate to anything, which sort of make you feel creepy crawly. Especially at the beginning in the storm, like, there was a whole lot of, like, vibration. I think there's some when just, like, the boat's moving, too, to make it sort of feel like the resistance in the water or something. So that's kind of cool. They're talking about this in the PS5 of, like, they're gonna have, like, you, as a developer, you can set different resistances to, like, the shoulder buttons to make things feel a certain way. I'm really excited about that because, like, when games use vibration really well, that makes me, like, really excited. You know? And this is one of those games that, like, uses, like, the vibration of the controller really well. And it really stands out to me. It's really interesting. And it's fun that way.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you think you're gonna finish it?
Probably not. I have so many games in my backlog right now and so many games I want to play. But then again, like, there's probably only another 3 hours of it. So it would be a pretty quick if I wanted to go back to it anytime. And it's not like I have to remember controls in the way that I am with some of the other games that I'm playing. So that also sort of de-incentivizes, like, going back to it immediately. Because it's basically just, like, the basic controls of, like, you move the analog stick to move and X is jump. Whereas other games I'm playing, it's, like, very more complicated controls. I have to remember what everything does. So I'm not gonna, like, hang up this podcast and immediately go back to it, but I'm not ruling it out either. It is at least really pretty to look at. Like,
that's not nothing.
The monsters are really cool looking. And the use of lighting is really good, I feel like. I really like sometimes you have to sort of navigate a stormy area with the monster in the water, and it's just like where you left your boat has like a light in it, but as soon as you like jump into that light from out of the storm, there's very like a seamless transition when you come out of the water to like everything's light now. So like the use of the environment and stuff is really, really cool. I like that part of it, I guess. And there's been some clever sort of platforming things, like, or actually I'm not sure this was intentional, but there's like something I had to get up on a building, and there's this weird thing happening with the water where like it was sort of like pushed out of a certain area, but I could sort of swim up the sides of it. So I was like, oh, I climbed the building by swimming up the side of the water, and I felt really smart until like I noticed a ladder like right to the right of me. I had been like circling that building for like a couple minutes looking for a ladder, and I just didn't see it. But I thought I was really smart, and then I wasn't. But I still think I was really smart.
Well, listeners, check back in next week when Emma and I recap our 6 weeks of gaming to find out if she finished the game or not.
Oh boy, I have so much to talk about on next week's
That's a good thing, because I don't.
We're swapping. Last time
I played like 5 games.
Me only talking about Fire Emblem, and Malin talking about a lot of games she played, and now Malin will only talk about Fire Emblem, and I'll talk about a lot of games I played.
I've played at least a couple more games, and I'm going to try to diversify the portfolio this week, but yes.
Okay.
Anyway, first things first, let's mash these games up.
Oh boy, I'd almost forgotten that we had to do that.
A point-and-click adventure about depression.
I had shoved it out of my mind that this was something that came at the end of the podcast as we were talking, I think because I was so poorly anticipating whatever we would come up with.
Okay, so
for this particular combination.
You could definitely do something with the are you a human or are you a robot, and you're not sure, and you kind of like switch back and forth.
Are we human?
No, that's the song. You can't sing that. The killers will come after us.
I didn't sing enough of it. It wasn't recognizable.
You're right.
The listeners don't know what on earth I'm referencing.
So it's like you aren't sure whether you're a human or a robot, and it makes it hard for you to connect with people.
Okay.
And also...
Is this the Blade Runner world where they're kind of hostile to robots?
I haven't decided yet. I haven't really decided. Or it could be you aren't sure if you're a human or a monster, if we want to go that way.
Sure, yeah.
But you do know that something happened to you that has made you not right in some way. It's a game about PTSD, maybe, is what it seems to be becoming. Is you have to point and click and find the evidence as to...
Of your PTSD.
Look, it's supposed to be a mediocre game, okay? So...
I do have PTSD.
I mean, it's just like you're discovering clues about your own past and why you are the way you are.
And at the end, you accept your monster parts.
Well, at the end, you realize no one else can see them. Or at the end, you look around and you realize everyone has them. Like...
That's deep, Mal.
It's like you do like an interrogation with people, and as you get to know them better, you get to see that like they have parts that are monster parts too.
Wow. Persona.
Stop.
How very Persona of you.
And yeah, and the NPC is just like in Blade Runner. They go around doing their own thing and like self-actualizing themselves on their own.
Oh, wow. Self-actualizing themselves on their own.
You know, I mean, that's kind of the whole point, right? Is it's like we all have these little damaged things that we think make us monsters.
We're really just dropping the knowledge. Malin's dropping the metaphors here for you listeners.
That's what the game is.
I'm being nice.
I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell if you were fully making fun of me.
It's just deep, like getting very wisdom-y here when usually we're like just scrambling to make sense of Tetris blocks and
Luigi.
You know, and Luigi. Usually we're only talking about Luigi on this podcast.
Look, if you want, this could
advice.
just be Gooigi the game.
Yeah, those comics. I would make a game out of those Gooigi comics.
Those comics are devastating. This is not super. Well, it could be. It's like you aren't sure.
They have a happy ending.
You aren't sure if you're Gooigi or Luigi.
Oh no!
This is the Nintendo. This is if the Switch will pick it up. This is what it'll be.
We're mashing up a new game into here.
You're right. I take it back. I take it back.
We already did Luigi's Mansion. We can't bring Luigi into this again.
So what is the world that's surrounding these monster people?
If Cyberpunk was about monsters.
So like steampunk.
Except no, you think you're the only one at the start, isn't it? So
yeah.
It can't be like that unless the world changes as. This is getting kind of cynical though.
Yeah, right. I don't know if I want the world to turn into. Well, maybe it. I don't know if we want the world to have like patches of lightness though. Like maybe
patches of lightness.
Like maybe based on like how you interact with people, like parts of the world start to seem less monstrous, or parts of it seem more monstrous, depending on.
We're mixing our metaphors here.
You're right.
I feel like if it gets less monstrous, why do the people get more monstrous?
Because you know them better.
We've identified monstrousness as a good thing here.
Well, sort of. It's a thing that hurts people too, though. But if you can so, like, the problem with it...
I kind of like the idea of, like, the worst people, like, being entirely human, though.
I guess, but what is... I thought this was sort of representing... I guess if you're a real egocentric maniac, you don't think there's anything wrong with you. So that would make sense.
Right.
But it's like the things that all of these... It's like you're getting to see people how they see themselves. So they aren't...
How very Persona of you.
Stop it. They aren't really monsters, right? You're just seeing them like only the people that don't think of themselves are well, but that's not allowed too. That's not necessarily true. You can have good self-esteem.
But
oh.
Yeah.
I got it. There's like a two-part to this. So as you get to know people better, you start to be able... This is going to be very Persona, so, like, screw you in advance. But, so, like, it's like an investigation game where you think you're the only monster and you're trying to discover if anyone else is a monster, right? And so at first you get to know people better, and as you get to know them better, you get to have a sense of how they see themselves. So you start to see people as they see themselves, so, like, as these monster parts, basically, representing whatever they think is wrong with them, right? But then... So that's, like... Confidant level 5. Mm-hmm. But then, as you reach 10, you start to help these people self-actualize so that they don't see themselves as monsters anymore.
Interesting.
And so in the end, everybody looks like a human except for the Trump stand-in, who does start to see himself as a monster.
But see that he does start to see himself as a monster. That's very hopeful. That's a little bit...
You're right. That was...
People would criticize that as a little bit too idealistic.
The game's not political now.
You're right. There's no politics in this game whatsoever.
No, I'll take that out. I don't want that in it. That'll date it.
True. Will it, though? Will it date it?
Do you like my idea of the monster mechanic?
I think we could use some more discussion of it, but I think it's pretty solid overall.
And obviously we'd have a very beautiful art style.
Yes, of course.
And I like this because I think
it'd be a 3D game.
I like this because the NPCs can be going around and interacting with each other, and based on that, they'll develop new monster parts or they'll heal their monster parts.
So you have to, like, keep people around healthy for each other away from each other.
Exactly.
You're like, oh no, Susan and Dan are talking, get them out of there.
Exactly. Oh no, Harrison Ford is playing a game based on a movie. Don't do it.
Harrison, stop it. Stay true to your principles.
Listen to your favorite band instead.
Yes, your favorite band. Juicebox the Toast.
That should be my costume. Anyway. I think that I have an interesting concept. This is better than most of our mashups. That's all that counts, really.
Yeah. Well, is that all that counts?
Yes.
Counts for something.
Yes.
All of our mashups are pretty bad. It's very rare that we stumble upon one when we're genuinely 100% enthusiastic about it.
I'm enthusiastic about this one, except that it's a point-and-click adventure. So.
Well, you know, like, there's different elements of point-and-click adventure, right? Like, the Blade Runner one had, like, elements of, like, talking, right? Too, of, like, investigation and stuff. It's not necessarily like you have to apply the right object to the right object. It's like learning.
No,
things,
you're right.
Right.
You're right.
It's more point and click in the vein of like Phoenix Wright than point and click in the vein of Monkey Island.
You're right. Wholesome Phoenix Wright.
Yes.
And dark. It could be dark. If you're not good at it, you could end up in Monster World where you can just see that everybody hates themselves. But you don't get past that.
That's dark.
That's one of the 2000 endings. Have fun, Q18.
Where'd you get 2000 from?
I just made it up.
Okay, yes, we have 2000 endings.
Look, we have 22 more years of technology than Blade Runner did, so I feel like we can...
800 of them are just the same ending with slight word changes.
You can choose your character's dialect at the beginning.
Yeah. Anyway, that's our mashup. Let us know if you enjoyed. How would you mash them up? What do you think about Sea of Solitude?
Yeah,
What movie would you like to see in game form?
Catch our new game, Mystery Monster, only on EA Access and the Switch.
Yeah, I was a little confused about the EA Access part. It seems like take $2 off if you had EA Access.
I think if you have EA Origin Access, you get access. It's like their premium tier.
Interesting. Good to know.
Well, folks, thanks for tuning in for another episode of Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your sore, but trying to embrace my monster parts host, Madeline.
I'm your other host, Emma.
Wow. Didn't try to come up with anything, huh?
I put my all into that.
Nice, thanks. And we're always happy to have you here with us on the show. If you like what you heard today, why don't you subscribe to the podcast? We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora, not just on the app anymore, folks. You can find us on the web. Overcast, Pocket Casts, anywhere you can find a cast, you'll find our podcast. While you're there, leave a rating and a review, why don't you? Because we love that stuff. Not all of them support that, but on the ones that do. You can also learn more about the show by checking out our website. We're on... I just tried to tell you that our website was on all the hosting platforms for the podcast, which is not correct. We're on GoDaddy, but you can find us at www.talkthispodcast.com, where...
You gotta remind me to switch off of GoDaddy when
yeah, I know.
our contract's up this year.
That was brutal. Maybe GoDaddy was about to sponsor us.
Never mind. I love GoDaddy.
We love it even more if it's free.
Go GoDaddy.
When you're on the website, you can take a look at the games in the hat that Emma's going to pull from our show in 2 weeks. You can see our whole list of episodes, and you can check out the blog, which really, for real this week, we're going to update.
I will. I'll have the next split screen. We picked a new show for a split screen, so that'll be fun.
And, like, my boyfriend has been, like, 85% ready for a month, and I just haven't been able to find time for the 15%.
It's okay. I believe in you.
It might not be this week. This is a busy week. Anyway, someday the blog will be back active, but you can read through the entire archive. We have, like, hundreds of blog posts, so surely you haven't read them all. Anyway, now that I've accused you of not being a loyal blog reader, you can also follow us on social media, so you'll never miss another blog post. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talk This Podcast, and we're on YouTube at Talk This Sisters, where you can watch Emma's Play This series, and you can watch a little bit of Clickbait Boyfriend, although I've hidden some of those videos. But if you go to the blog, you can watch them, because they're posted on if you read the entire Clickbait Boyfriend archive.
It's pretty good. You probably should.
There's a lot of good meme content in there.
Yeah.
Good cartoons, all that kind of stuff. If you haven't been following us on social media, you've missed my delightful Blue Lions Tag Yourself.
Yeah.
And Emma's Arrested Development memes. So,
yes.
You're really missing out. So without further ado, Emma, let's pick the games for 2 weeks from now.
All right, our old game shall be. I actually went through and re-added stuff because we were down to like 4 new ones.
Fresh.
So we have a whole new selection of games to go through. But we're going to be talking about Disgaea. Disgaea? Disgaea?
You say that as if I would know.
It's the tactics game with the little demon boy.
Tactics Demon Boy. Got it.
Yes. I think it's Disgaea. But that's our old game. And for our new game, we will talk about... Outer Wilds.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah. I think that's supposed to be coming out on other systems this month, so we might actually be able to try that.
Timely.
Yeah.
Well, folks, tune in 2 weeks for us to discuss those 2 games, which we will definitely know how to pronounce by that time. And tune in next week for round 3 of our second cycle of side quests. Can you believe that we've been doing this for 6 weeks already? I can't. Time flies.
No.
So next week we'll talk about everything that we've been playing for the past 6 weeks. I'm looking forward to it. Gives me a good impetus to try to diversify my games lineup. So, listeners, get hype.
Hype.
All right, Emma, do you want to send the people off with a smile or a metaphor or something?
This week, I hope you get a blade.
What?
Not a C. A blade. Not a C.
This is done.